So the new AP Top 25 polls will be released on Sunday. What are our expectations for how the voters react to a week 6 that saw a half dozen ranked teams lose? Some of those teams that were just on the outside of the polls, though, they also lost. So therefore, it's kind of tough to find teams that you're going to move into your rankings on the ballots. What do we think is going to end up happening when the new AP Top 25 comes out on Sunday?
Well, LSU's out. Washington's out. Who else is out? Is BYU falling out?
So I don't think that BYU drops out. I actually thought that Notre Dame might creep in.
I think North Carolina creeps back in too.
North Carolina could creep in.
Because are we doing will or should? Because
will.
If it's will. Notre Dame is creeping back in, guys. It's any excuse to rank Notre Dame will be taken.
Yeah, we do the should for Monday after and Poll Assassin. We do the will here on Saturday night. I've got Kentucky dropping out after losing to South Carolina.
No, I think they'll still be in the top 20.
Yeah, they're Teflon somehow.
No, you don't.
They will get that Will Levis was hurt. And you know what? Honestly, Will Levis was hurt, and that should be factored into what happened there. But
I've got Washington out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've got LSU out.
Yes.
And do we rank A&M for playing really close against Bama?
No, now you're just telling jokes.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I think James Madison finally gets in. 5-0 start, 22-point win against Arkansas State. The dramatic comeback win against Appalachian State is the only against Arkansas State. The dramatic comeback win against Appalachian State is the only single-digit margin on the profile. They've been dominant on both sides of the ball. Strength of schedule is not great, but strength of schedule ain't great for some other teams too.
Here's the other thing, though. Like, who's lobbying for James Madison? Let's be honest. The more people tweet about teams deserve to be ranked, the more susceptible AP voters become to ranking those teams because they see
they were 4th or 5th in like on the others receiving votes.
Yeah,
so they were on ballots already.
Yeah, but North Carolina won. They were unranked. They just beat Miami. They're going in. Notre Dame just beat BYU. They're probably going to be going in. There's only 3 teams falling out that we know of. Is James Madison going to be the 3rd team that takes over, or would an Illinois team that just beat Iowa have a better chance to get in than James Madison?
Madison was ahead of both North Carolina and Illinois in voting points last week.
Yeah, and it beat Arkansas State, while North Carolina beat Miami and Illinois beat Iowa. I mean, unless PFT Commenter is the most influential Twitterer of all time, I'm not sure that James Madison's going to be ranked.
He may have named me the head coach of the TCU Horned Frogs, but he's not going to necessarily advance the Dukes himself. Listen, the thing that's going to make you angry is I could see Baylor, which didn't even play, creep in just because they were just outside, and especially as we're looking at that BYU, Baylor, Notre Dame kind of log jam coming in. I don't think that Utah is going to fall all the way out after losing to UCLA, but I think that Utah's profile is up for debate. Like they have done a good job of beating the teams that they are better than, but you've got a loss on the road to Florida and a loss to UCLA. And if you're a 2-loss team, I think I'd like to normally see a more tightened up resume to be able to stay in the AP Top 25. Any expectations within the top 25 that should be exciting?
Well, how high is Tennessee going? I mentioned earlier in the show that I think I would have them in the top 5. Where do you think the AP is going to put them? Because
6, because I think 31-10 is going to end up keeping Michigan in. I've got Clemson jumping ahead of Michigan. They move to 4. Michigan goes to 5. I've got Tennessee jumping USC and Oklahoma State from number 8 to number 6.
I think some voters will wait to jump Tennessee because, like, if they beat Bama, they'll jump, and if they don't, they'll drop. I think it's kind of silly logic, but that is what we've actually heard people espouse before about how they do their rank. So it wouldn't surprise me if they stayed where they are. I would expect TCU to take a big jump from 17, probably leaping.
Do you think it gets to number 10?
I've got them to 12. Penn State was off this week. Ole Miss did not lose to Vanderbilt. And so we've kind of got a little bit of a log jam. Yeah.
Like Lane punched it in last play.
I wouldn't be shocked though, because with Penn State being off and TCU getting a big win on the road over another ranked team, if they leapfrog all the way to 10, just because you know how like the way that the mind works when you're filling out the ballot, you're going to fill out your 9. You're like, who's one of the 10 best? TCU did just get a big win. I'm going to pencil them in at number 10.
Is Kansas staying?
Yeah.
They better. I don't know if it's a guarantee that they will though, just because they're Kansas.
But if we're mentioning the likes of like Notre Dame, BYU, James Madison, Baylor, then Kansas stays in. One lost team whose only loss is to an undefeated team.
You have more faith in the voters than I.
Yeah, Kansas barely got in, right? And a lot of times voters are okay, who lost in his bottom 7 to 8 range? LSU, Kansas, Kentucky,
Washington. Get them out.
Washington. They're out. Yeah. By the way, Cincinnati did not look very good today.
No.
Nope.
But they'll stay ranked because they did win.
And that's fine. Exactly. Nobody will recognize that, or not nobody, but not enough people will recognize that to actually cause them to fall out. But they
from the rough draft of tomorrow's top 25 today, who knows what the editors did with it. In another week, the Bearcats may very well fall out of the rankings after a narrow home win against USF. But a healthy voting points margin against the rest of the pack last week and other teams taking a second loss should keep Cincinnati inside the top 25.
They'll probably move up after barely beating USF.
Like those results, I would almost rather USF pull off the win when it comes to this kind of stuff. But
all right, so does Alabama fall from number 1?
No.
Yes, I think that if they're willing to swap Bama Georgia last week for number 1, or was that 2 weeks ago?
It was last week.
I think they're willing.
Last week.
It was, yeah. So I think they're willing to put Ohio State in.
I'm with you, bud, because I think if you look at last week, Alabama only beat Georgia by 2 points as far as the voting, but Georgia had more first place votes. So I wouldn't be.
Do you think it's going to be Ohio State, or do you think it's going to be Georgia?
I think it'll be Georgia. I mean, they beat Auburn by 32. I don't know how many of the voters will have seen the game, but they will see that Georgia, like, oh, they look dominant again, even though they really weren't that dominant, and we didn't talk about it much at all if we did at all. But like, it was a pretty first half for Georgia offensively. Then the second half,
they only scored touchdowns off Auburn mistakes.
Yeah, their 2 touchdowns in the first half were a 31-yard drive and a 36-yard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in the second half,
a 64-yard Stetson Bennett touchdown run.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of the voters, all they're going to see, because they were doing their job, covering their game, they're going to look at the box score. They're going to see 42-10. And they're going to see that Georgia had a whole lot more yards than Auburn.
So the CBS Sports 131 has Ohio State number 1. We have been ahead of the curve at times over the years in terms of being ahead of the AP poll on this stuff. If Ohio State is number 1 in the AP poll, then I'm going to take credit for it, or we'll take credit for it. Yeah, that's right. We told you, fools.